The old stuff,
Right, exactly.
houses.
Okay.
That could be similar.
That kind of data, you mean, can you generate that kind of data?
That was not just trying to have you do essentially what you and I should probably take my password document out of Dropbox.
Oh, sweet.
That's it. No. Every login, every password, every VIN number, every social number, account number, credit card number, expiration date, everything is all in one file.
How about now, Sue?
Cleo, to upload like that piece of file and just have it, have it consist with that Cleo file now?
I'm not sure I understand, so is it case-based?
Yeah.
Its name is document 1 instead of passwords.docx. That's my level of security there.
Yeah. That's a log, and then you got just a good documents.
Yeah, it's not like doc, it's not like .doc or yeah, it's
Exactly. I think you just put here, PDF, PowerPoint, yeah, Clio. So, yeah, so I mean, we should just, yeah, so I mean, it's not restricted just to Word file, RTF, more format.
Another class. So, is it even connected here? Or no, is it even connected?
Yeah, that's the USB is there.
Right here?
No, it's
Right here?
So I was trying to get on the phone, but yeah, I'm just going to set the C drive. It's like,
I mean, they are.
So this, one of them is the drive, right?
Which
one is
say,
that?
when they're
You want to
doing
move
all
to?
three, so then they ask you, like, what have you done for your malpractice errors? What,
It just get expanded. Is it about the Oracle here? I see it right here. County presentation. This one? Okay.
yeah. All right.
It's much easier that way.
Yeah, you too.
Reboot. You do it from when you want to do everything, or you're going to download it?
Actually, Chad tried to hand me a racing cup. Do you remember anything wrong with that picture? Right.
It's all over down there. It's all over down there.
I know, I'm allergic to nuts.
Oh.
I'm only allergic to cashews.
That would have been awesome.
I have severe poison ivy allergy. Cashews and poison ivy actually are related.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
No, I know I'm allergic to peanuts and I'm not willing to try any other nut. I just don't want to. I don't think I need it actually, do I? Do I?
You do it for the
I'm hardly
webcast.
gonna be
Oh, for the
talking.
webcast. Yeah, we gotta do it for the webcast.
So Should I hook this little puppy on me, or can we just stand here with it?
Want the lights on or something?
I'm sorry?
You want the lights on back there?
Oh, no, I was just checking, making sure I can see time.
Oh, okay.
Got my watch too.
Oh, we got it down here too.
Oh.
We have video, it's just shooting straight out for the webcast. What you gonna tell us to break a leg?
If I say that, then you break your legs, you can go really bad. How about this? Don't do anything more than sprain it. But, you know.
You have it? You said 10 minutes? You want to put your PowerPoint on my PC? There's a suit. On that session, he has a PowerPoint, but he want to like download the PowerPoint to our PC.
All he has to do using a USB drive.
Yeah, that's what he got, a USB drive.
Yeah, make sure the computer's on, log it up, and then he can put it in the USB drive on the side of the monitor.
And then just download it, right?
Correct. All he has to do is open it.
But then, I don't think it has nothing to do with your stuff.
Yeah,
Hey, Yami.
I'll sort it out.
Okay, so I'm live. 270.
Still was this right?
But, you know, we have this digital display in our office that just also happens to double as a TV set.
Yeah, Jerry, could you stop out for 1 second?
So everyone watches.
In the ball.
Jared, I do have you live on YouTube. Okay, I'm live, and I'm gonna go ahead and start my recording now, so I can go out there and just make sure you all remember to start your cameras.
Should be in my second hit of the door.
So,
You real tech savvy?
number one, it's not working.
Well, plan B is we did.
There you go.
So we're going
He just wanted, his USB to,
Oh, yeah, we do it. Let's just do that.
Oh, no.
What station? Well, we're gonna try to download it, so we, get another copy of it. That's not a quick download. It wouldn't download? So like,
Do they actually look,
Are you signed in like as a
No, I put it on.
user? No, I mean, like, are you signed in as something online?
yeah.
But it should download to anyone's desktop, right? It doesn't have to be a computer, or a computer. It should download.
No, we just run.
I can't imagine if there would be some sort of, right? Yeah, if it runs okay on my, I'm gonna verify IT and see if they've ever had it plugged in. Or I could try to sign in
Oh,
with different users.
show you.
Yeah, go ahead.
You want to know if there any like special system we use to
Oh, yeah.
get the PowerPoint directly on the video screen.
Okay. I think we're okay.
Can you repeat the question?
Okay, you see this,
Are they being displayed directly on the screen or?
which one is it from?
Thank you for Thank you, sir.
internship, thank you.
What? I'm just gonna hold this and I can take it off.
We are only webcasting with the video camera recording. The video camera is recording a live shot. The presentation
Can be uploaded
Yeah, right.
by the presenter on the county website. And if you're unfamiliar with how to do that,
Left and right, which- What is this the same as the Spectrum that we have? That we bought? This teacher station? That's true.
It's, I've had it before. Once I
You need some? You need some? Extra water? The desk is good water now.
Okay. Yeah, we've kind of been sitting all day, couldn't stand.
Made the same observation over here.
You can stand up if you want.
I stood last hour, so I'm good for now.
just, make sure that you get another shot.
Are you texting?
No,
Someone moving on something?
I've got a problem, but I'm gonna stand in it.
Okay. That's what we could do, we could do it. Yeah. Room wide. Right.
You gave them their mics? I'm just gonna start this.
Like John's cell phone is one of the text.
Thank you. Good. When does this,
Can I check
does this start?
natural DNA, but you can
All my goodies.
Rich, have I introduced you to Shannon yet?
I don't think so.
Shannon is one of our libraries. Nice to meet you. Is that from the Great White North?
Anyway, just north of Seattle.
Oh, okay.
Actually, in my case, it's the Great Removals.
Sure enough, British Columbia. I so wanted to get up there during AALL, but I don't think I've got the time.
Ben Chapman was up
You called
2 or 3 years ago.
I
Showed us the bunnies, went out to dinner, fed some seals, you know. If you make it out, give me a heads up.
I would, I can't see over here, I was in town Wednesday, for the first time. So nonstop from Thursday morning.
There's the Clipper, which is a cat.
Yeah,
It's
I read that, but.
probably the nicest way to come up if you got the
But
time.
it's, yeah, that would have been it, but by the time it leaves, I have to turn around immediately and come back.
Art?
You want to see my Father's Day present?
Nice.
I got it shipped to the hotel, so I still don't know how to use it.
Happens when you put it in the environment, right? About all the technology.
Maybe have to be, maybe reduced to reading the instructions on it.
What is it? I was wondering the same thing. Oh, okay. Wow. That's pretty good. Oh.
So I heard this is a comedy app, or?
Not,
Oh, no, not this one?
not you.
Oh, that's at
Seven
the-
tomorrow?
There is
Oh, it's-
perhaps a little bit of comedy at the
Well, the
end
title
if
made me wonder
people
there with
stick
the
around.
student censure piece.
Well, the ironic thing is that our session description fell off the agenda today.
Oh,
And, yeah, and it wasn't on the website, of course, it was on the printed one.
Yeah.
So there was a little bit of talk about what being censored really meant.
you got censured then, is what you're saying.
Exactly, right. It was technical difficulties.
Just us, or was everything after 3:30?
I think it was just us. We were special.
I know how to use it.
I still think it was a simple.
So it go ahead and get started. Looks to me like it's close enough to 4 o'clock that we should get started. So I'm really surprised that we're not speaking to an empty room. It's kind of that time of day where everybody is thinking about, oh, I need to get over to the tower by 5:30 for the reception, and I'd like to drop my stuff off in the hotel room, and maybe a change of clothes. So I appreciate your patience in showing up for the last session of the day. I'm Cindy Johnson, excuse me, and I'm the Assistant Dean for Information Technology at the University of New Mexico School of Law.
I'm Tony Anderson. I'm the supervisor of media services and the Copy Center. So I do a lot of classroom instructional technology.
I'm Chad Covey. I'm fairly newly hired at the School of Law, and I'm a technical analyst.
And I have to tell you, we were probably the only 3 here who were thrilled when we heard that it was going to rain. New Mexico is under fire, of course, and as we were walking back from the building last night and it was raining, we were just absolutely thrilled. So we're going to talk about our clinical, the renovation that we went of our clinical law program, and people have asked us, what does this really mean? What does this title mean? And I have to tell you that we probably spent as much time talking about the title as we did working on the presentation. In true Cali spirit, Tony finished. We had to leave Wednesday morning at 10:15. Tony finished the end of the presentation Monday night at about 9 or 9:15. Chad was still working on slides today, just tweaking here and there around noon. And we've only done one run-through together, and so therefore this is my outline, which with a lot of crossed out and changes. So we'll see how this goes. And I also want to give a shout out to the people back in New Mexico, if they're watching, for allowing us to come, because we have more people here than what we do holding down the fort back in New Mexico in media services and IT. So a big shout out to Danny and Jerry and the IT students as well.
So that's where the comedy is. It's actually back at home.
Yeah. And I was also thinking as we were sitting in the last session, what a diverse crew we are. Chad came with a Windows 8 laptop, Tony brought his iPad, and I brought my Droid tablet. So nothing, I don't know, we're just a little bit different people. So I'm going to start out by just giving you a brief, I'm going to try to, okay Tony, this is not advancing. I probably broke
Do we have
it.
any tech people in the audience?
Tony is our tech guy, so of course he's been checking out the technology. I'll just use that then. Okay, it's good. We'll just slide through this. So we're the only law school in New Mexico. We have about 350 students. We are one of, and I prompted this huge discussion with our faculty that I didn't mean to by asking them if anybody knew how many people, how many law schools who were accredited had a required clinic program. And of course that prompted all kinds of discussion about what does it mean to have clinic requirement, are you including externships? So what I was told is that there are currently 6 accredited school with an in-house, I was asked not to call it a live client, an in-house clinic program. So we're pretty much considered a pioneer in clinical education. Some of you may know Mike Norwood and some of our other faculty members who have been really cutting edge in this area. We're consistently rated in the top 10. Our first clinic actually started back in the 60s. Mike called it a pseudo clinic requirement. At the time, we started our actual clinical law program in the early 70s. So our clinic is always taught by full-time tenured or tenured track faculty. And what we really want to talk about is the current clinic. So I'm going to fast forward over a lot of the history and just show you what our original clinic looked like. We started out in a different space. This is actually a space that was created in about 2001, 2002. These carrels were purchased in the 80s and with a Title IX grant, and you can see that they're pretty robust, they're pretty big space. They have the tall panels. And I think Chad's going to talk a little bit more about this, but the idea was that we wanted our students to feel like they were an associate in a firm. So everybody had their own PC, everybody had their own phone, and there was lots of space, but not real good for collaboration. So here's another picture of our furniture, and you can see it was pretty decent. It wasn't bad for what it was. You can see there are data poles coming down from the ceiling. When we first got this furniture, the clinic was located in an addition to the original law building, and everybody was on one floor. The faculty had offices in that area, so there was a lot of collaboration between the faculty and the students. But we received funding to add another addition onto the law school in about 2001, 2002. And at that time, the clinic was actually split over 2 floors. So we had half the Carrolls upstairs, half the Carrolls downstairs. We had, printers upstairs, printers downstairs. But the faculty, there were no offices inside of the clinical program area. So the faculty actually lived outside of the clinic in offices along the hallway. And that's kind of one of the things that prompted the renovation that we really want to focus on today. We have a slab building. So for those of you who can imagine trying to install the data in this, which is why we ended up in poles, there would have been a lot of trenching. We didn't have the funding at the time, and this is kind of the before picture. It wasn't great for aesthetics. The data poles kind of really detracted from what is actually a fairly nice area. So it was time for an upgrade, time for change. And some of the faculty have been very interested in what is, I've heard people call it different things. I've actually heard people call it flipped classrooms, which is not what we think of as flipped classrooms, but it's more of an open learning spaces environment. Faculty became very interested in that and in introducing collaboration back into the clinic. So here's where I was going to have a sound bite of the angels singing up in heaven, that, come on Terry, do it for me, ta-da, that heavenly sound. I was actually brought in on the meetings about doing a clinic renovation from the very beginning. Once the funding was secured, they brought me in and I got to be a part of it so that we didn't end up with things like an area that people were moving into that didn't have data. So it was a pretty good from an IT perspective from the very beginning. So some of our faculty started looking at, and this is what the scale up comes from. How many of you have heard of scale up? Has anybody heard of that? Okay, so the acronym is Student-Centered Active Learning Environment for undergraduate programs, and actually it's been around since the 80s. And it's typically it was designed around the STEM classes to introduce more collaboration in the undergraduate programs. There's the website. It's actually pretty interesting as I got more involved in space considerations, not only in the clinic, but just in designing classrooms. Some of our classrooms we're going to look at renovating. They have a lot of really good information there. So UNM actually created it started out being called Scale Up and it switched to Learning Spaces. UNM on main campus for the undergraduates created an open Learning Spaces classroom. So you can see that this is what they have done. There are 7-foot round tables. There are actually 9 students on a 7-foot table, which is a little bit crowded, but you have to understand that they're only in there for maybe an hour. The teacher station is located in the middle of the room. There's whiteboards all along the side, and there's projector screen. There's two projectors, I think, in the room. The teacher station has a smart podium, which a lot of us already use, and they used a product called SmartSync software. And it was a way for the faculty to collaborate with the students with document sharing, markup, etc. And we were very interested in looking more about that. These guys are going to talk a little bit more about some of the problems we're trying to solve. And they were actually using it via a wireless network. So we took some field trips down there, talked to the people who were in charge of classroom design for main campus, and we came up with a modified design. We have 5 clinics. We have upstairs, there are 28 workstations. Downstairs, there are 20 workstations. Previously, we had 40 students, no more than 40 students in the clinic. So we've been able to add 8 more students, which is helpful when you have a clinic requirement program. There are the same thing, couple of printers on each floor, multifunction devices, scanning stations, Westlaw Lexus printers, which of course now we're going to own, and a common filing area. The student tables, when we started out, we knew that we couldn't fit 9 students on a table. That was just not going to work for us. We started out thinking that, well, we have 5 students on a table. And we actually had a furniture builder, a local guy, who did a mock-up for us, because for some people it was really hard to visualize, well, what is a 7-foot table? And how much space will the CPU take up? And where are we going to put things? Where are we going to put the monitor, etc.? So we decided that 5 was absolutely too many people to put at that table, so we ended up with 4 students. A computer, a compartment for personal items, and every student still has a phone. So in addition to each clinic, each of our 5 clinics, we also reintroduced the idea of the collaboration between the faculty and the student by putting a faculty workstation that is adjacent to each area. So the faculty workstation is, in addition to their regular office, our faculty in the clinic are all tenure track. We do have a couple of floating offices that they could have chosen to sit in down in the clinic. But this is right in the clinic with the students, and they're expected to spend a lot of time down in that area. And the guys will show you pictures of the actual faculty workstations. So every clinic also has its own Walmart's smartboard, and it is connected to the faculty PC with the SmartSync software. And of course, every clinic has its own filing cabinets, bookshelves, and we probably spent as much time talking about this as anything. Every clinic had to have their own garbage can, and it had to be aesthetically pleasing. So there were a couple of challenges when you talk about trying to remodel 2 floors in our building. When we knew that we were going to have to do trenching, we wanted to get away from the data pools, but we couldn't shut the clinic down. So the first idea, believe it or not, was, well, we'll hold clinic downstairs and we'll remodel the upstairs. And then when we started trying to talk to the people who thought that that was a good idea about what it means to trench a concrete floor, they decided that maybe that wasn't such a good idea. But we couldn't shut down. We could not have clinic because students were relying on it to graduate. So how do you do that? How do you gut an entire large area, 2 floors, without shutting down? So we decided, well, we're going to use classrooms. We'll just take over a bunch of classrooms. We're going to move the students into it. It's mostly our seminar rooms, a couple of new courtrooms. Well, you know, they didn't have sufficient ports. Some didn't have phone lines. The rooms were really, really hot, really overcrowded. And rooms that were being used for clinic couldn't be used for other classes. So here's kind of what we did. I wish that we had a picture with the students in it, because that kind of gives you the real impact of trying to fit all of these students, all of the stuff that they needed. This is pristine. This is when we first set it up. By the time that the students moved in there and got their files in there and got their personal things in there, it didn't look anything like this. So we used these little seminar rooms. We used a DWI-DV clinical area that's on the other side of the building that wasn't being used during the summer, and we worked with main campus to install network switches, and then we activated or installed phone lines so that every room had at least 1 active phone in it. So this is what our new courtroom looked with all of the staff. The staff were moved down in here. We just took it over, moved, you can see the tubs of stuff. And
Oh, yeah.
here's one of the
Answer.
solutions.
Answer. So during this time, keep in mind that it was probably about this time of the summer, very hot in New Mexico. And coupled on top of that, while they were doing construction, the workers, I think they accidentally severed a water line, which knocked out all of our AC. So we didn't have air conditioning for about 2 weeks. And the students were crammed in these little classrooms with these little hot computers, all trying to make phone calls and work on legal things. And there was a room of students that also had the unfortunate privilege of having very large floor-to-ceiling windows with the sun streaming in. And I was walking by one of the windows and they had their door open and they looked just like, you know, the reason we don't have the photos is probably because we get sued for cruel and unusual punishment by the students in the classroom. But anyway, I walked by and I stuck my head in and they were just looking miserable. And I was like, you guys know, I've got an oscillating fan that somebody left in a classroom years ago. And you would have thought that I had showed up on a desert island with a smorgasbord from McDonald's. Oh, really? Can we have it? So went down, got the fan, brought it back up to them, and immediately they moved all their computers down. In the end, they were all huddled down, trying to get in this path of this blowing fan as much as possible. And that's how they spent the rest of the summer, huddled like that. It was kind of unique to see, you know, taken for granted what we have when it's taken away. So,
And New Mexico is
Exactly.
hot.
very hot.
So, you know, we moved them into these rooms, but then we had more challenges. And in New Mexico, I'm the IT director, but I manage Tony, who manages the copy center and media services. And also, somewhere along the line, somebody realized that nobody was in charge of phones. Well, that's kind of technology. Let's put it in the IT department. And I can tell you that being the phone queen has not been a lot of fun. Yeah, we don't have VoIP phones. We have those good old, POTS phones. So we had a lot of challenges with the phones. Believe it or not, for me, I probably spent more time on the phones than any other part of this project. I did fail when they started talking about color. Like, I didn't really care if the chairs were gray or black, so maybe it would have been more, I would have spent more time on that. But the phone thing was crazy because we had over 40 phone lines. Really, nobody had done a real good job of tracking them, and the timing was absolutely crucial. I mean, the clinic was just insistent, we cannot be without a phone. The fax machine has to work, multiple fax machines, right? So the timing was crazy. The way that it works is the incoming calls to go to the receptionist, they're transferred to a student never gives out their phone number, they'll return the call, but it goes out to the client as just a generic number. And you know, we had digital phones, we had analog lines, you name it, we had it, we had call. We had hunt groups, automatic auto distribution. It was really crazy. So, more solutions. We worked with Telcom. I went to a lot of meetings. We identified every single number. We figured out all of the programming on every single one of those numbers. We had this gigantic spreadsheet that had multiple worksheets, and it was wild. So we ended up, we moved the reception line first. We actually got them to agree to come and to stand in the wiring center. And at the time that we moved the phone over, they activated the phone line so that the receptionist was not without a phone for even 5 minutes. And then we moved the faxes. We either forwarded faxes to one central fax. We busied out phone lines. We forwarded phone lines. Phones were significant. So I'm going to turn it over to Chad. And I have to also say that this is Chad's very first Cali conference. And so far it's been a great conference. Huh? I gave up,
Okay.
probably.
Okay, so the faculty with the previous iteration of the clinic, they had wanted before, they wanted collaboration, but I guess it was a matter of execution from furniture design, spatial constraints where they didn't really get that. They had those, as we've seen in the pictures previously, very isolated carrels. So with this That's what we had previously, partitions with the cloth. We have sound management there. They were definitely isolated. I talked to in my interviews with staff and the faculty that good or bad, students were isolated. They nested into those desk areas there. Often they were then, and then continued to kind of nest into their computer, and also with their personal devices, they were texting and taking their own personal phone calls and things like that. So there are a number of things where it just siloed the students, and so they, with very much a laser-like focus, the direction of the new clinic, they wanted collaboration above and beyond everything else. So, and a number of issues, more with the spatial constraints, faculty to student interaction was poor, perceived as poor. And as you can see there as well, unless you do the little kind of hedgehog, as that one commercial had people popping up in the office, it was also a student-to-student interaction was fairly low as well. So no I in team. It's seen as they want teamwork, they want collaboration. Because if you work as a pack, being aware of the Lobos, the pack gets the meat. So we're also the Lobos. We have Gray Wolf advocacy out of the law school and out of Albuquerque. So it seems like an appropriate picture, and no wolves were harmed in that taking picture filming of this. So I can't speak for the
What about the bison?
Well, is anyone here from U of Colorado? No, we're a bit of a competitor, but so anyway, everyone's good on that end. So actually, I think the Buffalo Did Get Away was a pretty good PBS documentary. So about the Canadian wolves. Okay, so the solution: open carrels, get rid of the partitions. Actually, partitions, lower partitions were discussed at various meetings, but they were thrown out for a number of reasons. One of them, which was somewhat unexpected, one of the directors suggested that adding partitions would. These are fairly, we got a picture here where students are not in, but they're actually pretty regularly staffed. But there are times when there's no one there. So as you'll see in some of our other photos, students have a lot of files stacked up, and so they can kind of, take over someone else's space temporarily. So the partitions, if we had any there, would have gotten away with that. But I think what you can see is we've got really open sight lines to the faculty over here, to the smartboard here. And just as an aside, one of the really important technologies, one of those things I would have overlooked, are the dual monitors. Faculty have dual monitors, and from my interviews with them, I don't think you could pry those dual monitors out of their hands with a crowbar. They really love them. One for them, one they can turn for the students to interact and discuss things. So dual monitors, kind of an overlooked technology, but really important to them. So, and again, proximal faculty workstations, previous iteration, faculty are in different offices. You can't see if the faculty there, faculty can't see if their students there with those large partitions we had previously. Everything's really open. They can call out to each other. They can rolling chairs. They can roll around. Easy to get to each other. Okay. Some issues noted by some of the faculty staff I talked to. Some faculty prefer scheduled face-to-face meetings. Throughout my interviews, got suggestion that there is definitely collaboration needed, but there are spaces where faculty have to do an aside with students, maybe some difficult conversations, and so they need a space for that. One of the really good things, it's kind of like a Del Toro movie. There's all these gears and machinery in place that all of the clinic faculty, if they're not moved directly into the clinic space proper, their offices, their faculty offices are kept very close. So that way, students don't have to walk very far. We have a fairly lengthy building, but their walk to their faculty mentors, supervisors, is fairly short. And again, it's a lot of, I think you all know, administration, moving people around, moving offices. There's a lot that goes into keeping things and people close together. Okay, and with that, I think it's Tony's turn.
Yep. So while Chad and Cindy worked a lot on the hardware aspect of it, I did a lot with the technology, which I can't get to work right now. There we go. So it's basically taking what they were wanting to do and implementing. So that led me to the big question of what exactly were they trying to do? So we sat down in a lot of the meetings that Cindy talked about, and I started to get a feel of some things that they were wanting to do, even if they didn't know exactly what that might be, which included shared document editing. They wanted to be able to have an example of a legal situation and have multiple students be able to edit the document simultaneously or look at it and give their input on it, whether it was an exercise or an actual case. They of course wanted to do screen sharing, so that way the document in question they're working on, everyone could see it at the same time, or if the instructor was leading an example, they could push that out to the students and not necessarily rely on the projector and the board. They also wanted to do more group work. And this actually was one of the things when we were researching it that we had kind of a hang up on, but it turns out it really wasn't that big a deal. What they wanted to be able to do is take our individual clinic and break it down into smaller pieces. So, okay, you 3 students go work on this problem, and you 3 students work on this problem, and then when you're done, come back and we'll talk about it. So they wanted to be able to collaborate on a large scale and a small scale. And then the other thing was they didn't really know exactly what they wanted to do specifically. They had an idea, what would be great if we could kind of do something like this, is this possible, is it not? So I had to take all this information and go out and kind of, have my own questions and answers. As far as what was out there, what kind of software. I mean, there's some software packages that I knew of that would come close to these types of things. But in a situation like this, it's always a good time to get out and see what's new, and not just rely on something you know, because there may be something better you haven't seen yet. Another big concern. What was main campus using, if anything? Cindy touched upon this a little bit because it turns out they had actually already kind of integrated a room like this into one of the larger halls. And so she said we went over and took multiple tours of the room and got to see how it was working on an undergraduate level, mainly with math classes, geology classes, where there's physical, practical things to work with, that kind of stuff. Which led to, could it be modified to fit our needs? And was it a smart idea? Play on words here. Excuse me. So the final decision on software actually boiled down to this. Next door to our building is a brand new building. It's been built for, about 2 years now, a year and a half. This is the Pamela B. Menzner Court of Appeals. The old building was in Santa Fe and it was very old, not very technology friendly. So they raised money, built this new building. It's got all kinds of technology throughout the building and all the judges love it. But it turns out they weren't using all of it. So they, out of the graciousness of their hearts, donated 5 smart boards to us. They had the smart boards sitting around smaller conference rooms on the first level, and like I said, they just really weren't using them. They had technology in their offices, and they had a very nice library on the 3rd floor, which had all the capabilities there, and that's where they would normally gravitate to. Also, along with this, they also gave us 2 laptops, but they didn't include the software. So this kind of helped us, well, okay, we saved a bunch of money here on buying the smart boards. So we'll take a look at the software, and since it seems to be working on main campus, and I'll try to see if we can shoehorn everything we need to into it. But then there's question marks about it. Was it really a lucky coincidence? So great, we got 5 smart boards dedicated to us for free. So what are we going to do with them? Well, let's put them on mobile carts. So during the initial stages when we were designing the rooms and the blueprints and stuff, I noticed, and I took architecture when I was younger, I noticed on the blueprint that there was a weird little symbol, it looked kind of like a triangle looking down on top. And I asked them, so what is this? And they said, well, that's where we want the interactive part of it to be. We want it to be able to be moved around these carols. And I think mainly, really, they were doing that just for the sake of trying to break up the normal classroom structure of someone standing in front and everyone looking this way. They wanted to be able to, initiate collaboration wherever they needed to. So their idea always was from them to have some sort of mobile solution. And in most cases, it was on the opposite side of where the clinic was going to be. So to me, that automatically kind of raised some red flags as far as, okay, what am I going to do with cables? Because in my classrooms now, unlike these, we have carts that actually wheel around. And I'm always having people, talk about the cables, someone yanks the cable out of the wall. As you can see here, let me see if I can get the pointer where. When we got the carts, we brought them in, we assembled them, and immediately, right off the bat, when they were assembled, they're in this lower position, which means everything's down here. And the projector up top there actually flips down. It's much like the projector that's up here. But when you raise it up to the position it needs to be in, this thing and this thing cannot occupy the same space at the same time. And it didn't take very long before somebody found that out. They're like, bam, And those lights actually hang by cables, so they swing around and fall off. So
to be really honest, and I mean, they're just monstrously big. I mean, they're huge. They have these big, huge blue handles that hang off the sides that if you push them fast enough, would probably take flight. So it just became really a situation where they just were not going to work. The clinic, even though we had just redesigned it and put all this new furniture in, it was much more open. Space is still at a premium. You only have so many square footage. And the space we opened up was all vertical instead of horizontal. So we were trying to wheel these monstrosities around, which is counterproductive. You spent more time trying to rearrange that thing to get it in position so that we could see it than you would spend actually using it. So we decided to do something else, put them on the wall where they should be. So after we paid all this money to buy these things and have them assembled and have them put together, we took them all apart and put the smart boards back on the wall. And I put these up for sale on eBay if anybody's really interested. Cheap. So that was the mobile cart. And in the bonus round, after we got the carts put together, and this was actually before we put them on the wall, we got all the carts put together, we plugged them into the computers and installed the software, and it was just running an initial test just to see, hey, this is the first time we fired it up and see what's going to be like. And during the initial test, there was something on the board itself, right? It comes with all the pens and everything, down the bottom. And I was taking the pens and I was using them, drawing, going through the software, everything's great. The board was a little dirty. So I reached up in my hand and I wiped the smudge off, and I found out the boards were touch sensitive. So it was like having a giant iPad on the wall. And the faculty were like, oh, yay, because they really love that kind of stuff. So the boards were touch responsive. They come with the multi-gesture, 2 fingers to scroll, pinch, and pull in and out, and you can draw with your fingers, stuff like that. So they didn't really have to worry about grabbing the pens and getting confused as to what they did. If you made a fist like this, it would erase. Pretty cool. The software in itself actually had more tools than they would use. The SmartSync software and the whiteboard software that comes with the smart technologies is really geared towards education. It has a lot of different facets to it. A lot of it's aimed towards younger levels of education and stuff, but there are interactive features like you could design a map and have it, be able to put pieces in place, things like that. They probably wouldn't use that, but there could be a possibility where they could take something like that and bend it to their will. The one example I gave when they had their open house was I went up to the board and I drew a couple of weird L shapes. And it took a second before they realized I was actually drawing an intersection. It's just very crude, stick figure stuff. And I drew a square with some headlights on it, and I drew another square over here, and a car was sitting here, and a car was sitting here. And this car over here had its blinker on, right? And I said, so okay, so this guy here assumes this guy's turning, and this is the demo I was giving. And the aha moment was when I grabbed the car with my finger and I went like this. It actually moved the entire, like a piece of clip art at that point. It actually animated it across the screen as if the car was driving, and as it came across, I grabbed the other one, flipped it up, and they collided with each other. So I was able to, to express a point or a concept in a way that they probably wouldn't have done before. So there's a lot of tools that they could have used that they may or may not, but something they should investigate because with all things, practice makes you perfect. It also allows for growth and approach, kind of along the same lines of what I was just talking about. The one thing we did find out was the clinic size could be scaled up easily. When I was talking about earlier when they were wanting to divide down into groups, they were really concerned because we have 5 different clinics and they're all different sizes. And the maximum size of a group you can break down to is 3. You can divide students into groups of 3 or 2. And it turns out we weren't really asking the right question because how are we going to have this clinic that's got 7 people in it and we only divide it into groups of 3? It doesn't make any sense. As it turns out that when you start the SmartSync software, I don't know if anybody here is familiar with it or not, you can create basically a virtual classroom. And that classroom is the thing that pops up on the students' computers they can click and connect to. So you can have a virtual classroom that's named, the Southwest Indian Law Clinic, which is one of our clinics. And the students that are in that clinic can connect to it. Now, if another student from another part of the building, like downstairs or in the next car all over, accidentally clicks on it, they can connect to it too, but the teacher or the instructor can disconnect it if need be. But the really cool thing was that, so we now had the ability to divide them into clinics, we had the ability to divide the clinics into smaller groups, but we had the ability to go the other way. You can make one large clinic and have all the students, both upstairs and downstairs, connect to it. And whether they could see the instructor or not, the instructor could be heard, you could see what was on the screen, they could interact by asking questions, there was a polling feature, there was a question feature, And, you know, it allowed for an overall giant clinic collaboration event. If they know we've never actually done that, but, you know, it's there if they want to use it. However, the anti-bonus. There's always an anti-bonus. You get something, you gotta pay something, right? Nothing's free. The software training. So when we decided to go with the software, we spoke to our vendor, who came out, and it was also the same guys who put together the carts and installed everything, and also took apart the carts and then put the boards on the wall, and did all the wiring and that kind of thing for the projectors and stuff like that. They were also providing us with the SmartSync software, the entire suite, and we were getting training for it too. So the training was for all of us in the IT department, not just for me or my guys. Basically because at any point we wanted to have somebody be able to run down and assist them in the clinic if they were having a problem. But unfortunately, the training didn't really go that well. The guy either, it fell in one of two categories. He either couldn't get it to work. It was, oh, I'd love to show you that, but it's not working for some reason right now because we were doing, you know, distance from us to Arizona. Or he would keep referring us back to the manufacturer. Oh, there's a really great video that shows you how to do that on their website. So we were paying a lot, and this actually got resolved, but we were paying a lot of money to be trained on something that he couldn't show us, or he was sending us back to something that was free on the web anyway. So that kind of didn't go very well, and so what I ended up doing was basically just doing it all myself. So I went out and I watched some of those videos, but more importantly, I just opened the software and started playing around, experimenting with it, seeing what could be done.
And they did refund our money for the trip.
Yeah, they did eventually refund our money, which was nice. But like I said, it's the experience, you know, the after the fact correction just kind of helped a little bit, but it led me to this. I figured it out for myself, and then I myself turned around and trained the others, which leads me to the other question of, am I in the wrong business? Should I be a smart guy? I don't know. So we got the software training figured out. Like I said, with every endeavor, there comes, I'm just going to go around here.
It's not looking well.
There comes hits and misses. So we had a hit. We got donated smartboards, which was very awesome. The guys next door at the Court of Appeals love us. We have a very good relationship with the judges. They come over, they teach classes, they come to our events. We send our students over to sit in on their trials and basically to talk to them whenever they hold educational events or any kind of lecture lunches and that kind of stuff. But we missed out on the mobile cards. The money we saved by getting the smartboards donated, we turned around and spent on mobile cards, which are now collecting dust in one of our storage areas, much like the Ark of the Covenant in Indiana Jones. Our software package turned out to be great. It did everything we wanted it to do. It still has the capability to go forward in time. But our training kind of left a bad taste in our mouth. We did overcome it, but you know, it was one of those things you had to go through. This is another thing that's kind of more campus-wide for us. The technology is available, but it's not always used. They'll sit there and they'll have their clinic, and that board will just sit there and be blank, nothing on it. And it's one of those things where I've gone and I've trained people. We have, you know, every semester we have different faculty roll in and out of clinic and that kind of thing. And it's just a matter of they don't ever come down and say, hey, show me how to use this. You know, I send them emails, hey, would you like to know? Oh, sure, that sounds great sometime, I'll schedule it, and I never hear from them again. So, but they're getting better. The ones that have used it actually love it, and I think it's great. So, you know, it's just one of those weird situations. So, whenever you're doing something like this, you try not to have too much waste, because we all know where that ends up. Sorry. Oh, sorry. Back up 1 second. So overall, while some things did end up a wash, the solution ended up being at least 95% of what they were looking for, even though they didn't exactly know what they wanted to do. Which, you know, like I said, is a very good number to hit. They're very happy with it. They are using it more and more every day, so hopefully pretty soon all the clinics will be firing on all cylinders, and they'll be able to use the interactive collaboration environment we've created to its fullest capacity. The weird thing about it is that none of, you know, we can't make any of our other students that have sat through the old clinic go through this new clinic, because that would just, again, be cool and unusual. So we don't really know comparison-wise, because the new students don't know anything different than what they have now. You know, they're not being able to see if the person next to you is actually there or not in the old clinic, or that kind of thing. So, that's my portion of it.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
If this wasn't compressed into a summer project, do you think you would have just ordered one part to start with to see if it would work?
Well, like I said, when I looked at the blueprint and, being able to read blueprints when I did take architecture, I told them, I said, well, you've got, it actually ended up being something like this real quick. Let me just show you real fast. So they had, the teacher station here, they had a carrel here, a carrel here, a carrel here, and then they had this weird triangle looking thing here. And the teacher sits here, and I was like, what is that? And they're like, well, it's going to be the interactive, smart board thing or whatever. I'm like, okay, so how are you going to get from here to there? And then I wasn't even thinking about the lights. And at first, my only concern was, the cabling across the room, because we were trying to create this open space and not having distractions and stuff, and being able to wheel this thing around, especially because they wanted to. Well, we could put it here sometimes. Sometimes we could put it here. Maybe we could. I was just like, I don't think that's really going to work. But again, it was one of those situations where I don't have it, so I don't know. So buying the one probably would have been a good idea. But like you said, it was compressed, and when we did the order, it was all inclusive, the carts, the software, the installation, that kind of thing. And to be honest with you, the carts weren't bad. It just didn't work in that space. I mean, they were very easy to wheel around. While they were big, they were pretty light, and they were very well made. But they were just.
What kind of footprint did the car have for its leg?
It was probably about the size of this right here.
We ended up taking the arms off, those big wings on the side. Tony and the guys just unbolted them and took them off, trying to make them a smaller footprint. And I would say absolutely, we would have only bought one cart had we not tried to do this in a very short window.
Did they have walking wheels as well?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Big problem. Okay, well, I'm kind of like the narrator from World War Z. I come in after the fact, so I've got the after action report, how the clinic is perceived now. So, and for me, it seemed to break down into 3 components: vision, sound, and space, which I'll get into. And first up, I've got a prop. If I learned anything from Carrot Top, it's actually 2 things. You can work out too much, and also props are kind of handy. So I'm just going to send this around. This is one of the keyboards that was selected to be used in the new clinic. So guys, it's pretty basic, but
Tiny.
Yes, it is
So
tiny.
was anybody in Phil Bull's portion earlier today? Did you give away prizes? Okay. Here you go. Here's your prize.
Well,
Yeah.
I would have ended, you should have ended with me, not started. Now I'm okay.
You have to fight to get it back.
Yeah, I actually don't want to try to get it through TSA again. So if anybody,
Great.
can I give it away? Yes, I can.
8 techs enter 1 tech leaves.
So sound was clinic. It's definitely it's a success. Everybody who's in it, I got the sense, abidingly a success. One of the things I kind of wondered about before we started to occupy it was sound. I was in there working on the computers when they were doing telephone tests of almost 50 plus telephones. It was really murderous. I felt like the Police, the Synchronicity song, the telephone was ringing, is that my mother on the phone? It was really, really unpleasant. I had a sense that it could be a problem. And I think if there's one component of the clinic and the upgrade, the remodel that was maybe suboptimal, it would be sound. As we pointed out previously, yes, good. All right, so we've got some block sight lines with the old carrels, but one of the things we did have was with the partitions, we've got cloth. So we've got some baffling there of sound. And now with the new open space, it's a bit, I got a sense from some of the folks I interviewed that it's a bit of a panopticon/panopticon, where the students with these open carrels, there's a lot more noise. Some staff noted that some of the students now, before they were taking personal phone calls on their cell phone, now they're leaving the clinic room, the space to take those calls, that the comfort levels maybe been diminished a little bit for the students. And one of the things with the scale-up model, with even the flipped classroom, there's a lot of consideration of furniture, of technology, of power, things like that. And I think implicit in that scale-up model is the notion of temporary occupancy, where you might be in for an hour, a couple of hours, but then you kind of shuffle along, you go along your way. And with clinic students, it's much different. They are expected during the summer, 10-week summer courses, to be in their carols up to 40 hours per week, some even more. During the fall and spring, the expectation, I think, is around 20, 24 hours per week, and they end up spending more time than that. So the scale-up model is definitely good. It is working great, but there's some considerations I don't think that are built into it when we're talking about really a fully staffed, it's a law firm. So the question is, does scale-up work appropriately for combined learning and workspace? Okay. Vision, sight lines, based on interviews, my interviews, it was the best improvement. Faculty and students have immediate sight lines to each other, can make a beeline to each other. As we showed in previous, although we've got kind of a new technology there, paper on the smartboard. That's interesting. I don't think we meant to post that, but they've got immediate sight lines. They can see the faculty can see them, they can see each other. Again, something easy to overlook, but rather than stationary chairs, we've got rolling chairs. And we notice it's easy. They roll around a lot, communicate with each other from carol to carol, from carol to faculty, and up to the smartboard. So again, kind of an overlooked technology, but it ends up being pretty important to them, to the users. All right, so again, 2 smartboard. They can also then, it's a vision thing as well, the dual faculty monitors, 2 very important technologies to them. So obvious benefits and some that are not so much, not so obvious rather, I should say. They can read visual cues. So during my interviews, some folks mentioned that I think we've definitely got increased noise in the clinic. However, when there's an important conversation going on, a student talking to a client, it was noted that students, we noticed even without saying it, without really even being cognizant of it, that someone's doing something important. So we kind of auto throttle and tune our own conversations down a little bit, or even completely go quiet. So while it is a little bit louder, when something important is going on, the folks I talked to in the clinic indicated that there is some self-tuning that goes down there. So not quite to that level. All right. Okay. One of the other things that, again, would this not have happened with the carols? It's impossible to say, but with the open carol situation, we had a client who I think called in and was threatening suicide with one of the students. And so the student obviously had a look on their face that was, I think, one of shock. And so someone sitting nearby to them saw that there was a problem, went over, and then the student wrote on a little notepad what was going on. And so then the student who was able to help out got the note to one of the faculty supervisors. Faculty supervisor got the suicide prevention hotline number, and then wrote a quick script for the student to follow. And the upshot was what the faculty got across, because this faculty person had been through this similar situation, got across the student was, here's the suicide prevention number, get it to them, have them call that number, and an hour later, make sure they call you back. All this went down, and as far as I know, long term, this client, is still with us. So it worked out pretty well having that open situation. Facial recognition, the people nearby were able to see that something fairly serious was going down, and they were able to help out their carol mate. All right, so going back to the time and temporal situation when it comes to scale up, I think the faculty and the clinic directors have noticed that, recognize that there is a bit of an issue that the students in the clinic are always on, 8+ hours a day. And so that they're not just worker bees, they need to have time for reflection, for strategic thinking. And so, actually I'm skipping a little bit ahead, but as part of the reflection is the technological component. And so smart boards, and we have these digital recording rooms now where the interviews take place, allow the students to go over what they've done. They can see themselves, they can reflect on their work product. Okay. And so to do that, we have to get far from the madding crowd. So to get away from all the busyness there of the zombie army. So, and part of that, the clinic directors, they recognize that this panopticon is in place. They want to discourage this tunnel vision, and so they've recognized too the consequence of all this collaboration. You've got audio noise of people talking. You also have visual. It's easy to walk around, and so without that carol, you can actually see people moving around. So there's a lot of input, cognitive input. And so it makes things a little bit difficult to do that strategic thinking. Okay. So what they have done and are doing, they're creating these ancillary spaces that encourage strategic and reflective thinking. Right now, they have in place a conference room. Again, something we would probably take for granted. It doesn't seem like it's got, it's a cool technology or space or anything like that, but it's very important to them. It's a room where they can get away from that madding crowd and do more of the student faculty thinking that they need to do. They're also looking at adding three spaces. They want to add a library which would be internal to the clinic space, although we're a little tight on space, so that's something to be negotiated. But they want to add a library where they can get away, not even necessarily a library full of legal books, but I think one of the books mentioned was something like Great Expectations, where even if they don't pull the book, the students can just pick something up and read something and think about something other than the law. So they also want to create a transition landing, which will be directly outside, and I'll have a photo of this in a second, outside of the clinic, where, again, they just get away from the clinic proper and from clinic thinking and dealing with clients. And it's got a pretty decent view, so that right there. So they can look out on our optimal use of water in the state of New Mexico with our nice green golf course there. Anyway, it is pretty, and then on the other side, I didn't get a photo of it because the sun's very bright, is we have the picture of the Sandia Mountain, so it's a great space to be in. And then one room over, right now it's a regular classroom. They want to turn that into a creative laboratory where that would be where students interact with each other, faculty with students, so forth. And it's departed from the clinic, the day-to-day. They do the more strategic thinking. So a bit like a campfire or cafe-like setting. Again, another technology they mentioned, which was very important to them, was food. I guess it's a type of technology, and so one of those things in this campfire setting would be a sort of kitchenette. Food is very important. Came across in a number of interviews in terms of connecting people and encouraging that collaboration. So something along those lines, although without the fire, we'd maybe have a sapphire or halon system nearby. So, all right. Okay, space. This is not staged in any way. I took this a couple weeks ago. It's a photo of a carrel in use. You can see piles of folders and paper there. They're pretty squeezed. So space is at a premium, both in terms of the larger clinic and as seen perspective of the students. So faculty, clinic directors, they want more operational space. Those three spaces that I talked about previously. Students want more personal workspace. As Cindy referenced, at some point in the design process, the notion of it started at 9 with the scale-up model. That's UNM's, and I think it originated with MIT, with 9 students on a 7-foot table. Then I think the architect, furniture designer came back with 5. The mock-up was made and some headlock negotiations ensued, and it got it down to 4. I've got indications that students, they haven't been complaining, but they've given some indication that they would even like to see 3 per a 7-foot table. So, all right. So modeling. So we did model things, as Cindy said. Good process, but with some unexpected outcomes. Furniture designer went so far as to build a mock-up. Cindy got a PC, keyboard, mouse, and telephone, and got that on the mock-up. And then that's the point where this mini keyboard came into play. It was determined with a regular keyboard that it was too big for that space. So with some research, Cindy came across this one, and it was deployed uniformly across the clinic. The first semester after we moved in the new clinic, we had about 15 to 20 people say, get rid of it, please get me a regular keyboard. Next semester, the same number, with about 50 students. You can see where I'm going. We eventually said, for those few that were left, we're just going to pull them. If anybody wants a regular, or the small keyboard, we'll bring it back, but we're just going to regular keyboards. So we modeled it, but unexpected outcome, didn't see that one coming, so it goes. So.
Actually, I saw that one coming. I said
yes.
The students are going to hate this keyboard, and they wanted to go with it anyway, and now we have tubs of them, and I think we're going to put them up with
Also
little parts.
available.
Yeah, up on
So, yeah, and probably the biggest thing is the Control-Alt-Delete on that keyboard. It's I believe it's a delete key that's ultra hard to find. So upshot, limited use likely means limited impact. High use objects like carrels, like keyboards, kind of easy to overlook, can mean high impact. So make a small change in subway system, you can back a lot of people up. All right, so small change in object or environment can have profound impacts. Last little note, some final numbers on the student workspace. I don't have the numbers for the previous carols, but each student now has roughly 1,100 square feet of space. I didn't quite measure the arc, there was some rough geometry, but 1,100 square inches of space. Of that, 600 square inches are used by the PC, keyboard, and phone. So more than half is used by the technology. It's not leaving them a lot. Service tower in the middle, and you can see the gentleman there working, which was kind of a one-time deal. It's great if you're a technician to get in there, you've got full access, but that thing's using 729 square inches of that table, so it's taking a lot of space away, and it's really just kind of a one-off. I mean, you know, occasionally we have to go in there and check a cable or something like that, but it's a lot of real estate. So, and I think some of the photos might have shown that right now that real estate, the students will put maybe some papers up there, but it's hard to reach. They'll generally put like their Purell and maybe a phone book or something like that. So it's not optimal use. Time for Q&A.
Wouldn't all-in-one be any better use on that space?
It might be. You know, we're buying the ultra small footprints, and so, you know,
Yeah.
I don't know that you're
How big
really.
a monitor are you using?
We actually kept smaller ones in there. I think that they're 19s, aren't they, Chad?
Monitors?
Yeah. We upgraded everybody to big ones, and then, you know, no. But it's a beautiful space, I'll tell you that. And I think that the whole open collaborative has been really, really well received. I think that it is a little bit of an adjustment, but overall, in spite of all of the challenges, it was definitely a very well received project. Yeah, Rich.
What was the software licensing cost for the actual computers for the collaboration?
Should I have to look it up? I don't recall off the top of my head. There were so many numbers in that project.
I think it was somewhere like 1,500.
Yeah, it wasn't horrible. We got the educational discount, and the SmartSync works really, really well.
It does. The nice thing about the SmartSync that they've done is they have attached a license to the teacher station. So you pay the price for the software that the teacher uses. You can have as many students as you want to.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is it an ongoing or is it one time?
No, it's ongoing.
So 1,500 a year?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. It's a one-time thing.
One time.
I wouldn't swear to that.
I think.
There's going to be an upgrade cost somewhere down the road.
Yeah. It's in my, this might come up for renewal file.
And I mean, the software also included a lot of cool things that we're not really using thus far. Like one of them was a response technology, an app you could download on your phone.
Yeah.
For students can use, because right now we use iClickers, and students could use that. In the clinic, they don't really have a need for it. So we have 5 licenses for that that are just sitting there, so we can use it somewhere else.
Yeah.
So was there an alternative to use like iPads and Apple TVs with large monitors to avoid the smart board?
You know, originally, when I saw this, I talked to him about, well, if you're going to be pushing everything to the screens anyway, why do we need this big thing? And he said, well, we need something for the instructor to interact with. And my initial thought was, well, we get them an iPad or some sort of tablet they can carry around and do these types of things. But we're having issues with the wireless stuff. See the look I'm getting. So they really wanted to do the smart boards. That's what they know, and just lucked out that we got those donated. So,
And they're actually using them?
Yeah.
A lot?
Yeah. They do.
But,
We actually have a couple.
Define a lot, Terry.
Well,
They
we
use
got them,
them.
nobody uses them.
Yeah.
No, we actually have several professors that use them religiously. I mean, they put everything up there. Even if they're not showing a document, they'll turn them on and write on them using the pen.
We have one more quickie, if you just
Since you guys
bear with us.
the last part of it.
Yeah, so is it this?
Yep.
Okay, so some of you remember John's opening plenary a couple of years ago up at Marquette, and so just to set you in the right mood to go to the reception. Come on, do it with me. Harlem Shake.
These are our students, by the way.
Really?
That's what I call a mama.
Snapped you, and this is crazy, but here's my number, so call me maybe. Dude, we're not doing that one. Oh,
All right, go party.
Thanks, guys.
Oh, Josh. Hey, Josh. Thank you.
Actually, I wanted to bring in a blender, and you know, we're doing Gallagher.
That's a blend. One of the state property.
So you see how fast my friends failed to go get their tickets?
But, well, they probably all present, they probably have the are these the same series?
That's where Terry and Andy were going. He's my bud. Got everything? Good to go?
Intellectual property of my section.
You know, being in law school, everything changes every year. Are you going over to the reception?
Well, you know what, I didn't register. So apparently that's a big thing.
Yeah.
But that's all right.
นั่งตรงกลางเนี่ย
เมื่อยคอคราวที่แล้วเมื่อยใช่ไหม
ไม่เห็นด้วย
เพราะหมูไม่เคยนั่งริมเคยแต่นั่งเนี่ยสามวันนี้หมูนั่งสามนี้ตลอดเมื่อยคอจริงคราวที่แล้วนั่งตรงนี้ปะมันแฟลชไปเด็กเนิร์ดมากมาห้องเลยเรียนวิชาพี่วินรีบปะ
รีบว่า
อันเนี้ย
พี่เอาแค่พี่เอาโจทย์อันนี้กับการด้าน5ที่กันอย่างอื่นเอาไว้ก่อนก็ได้พี่เอาแค่ตรงนี้
790ถึงแล้ว
เอาอันนี้กับอันนี้
เป็น
กับไปการบ้าน
เขาหมูคงไม่ได้อ่านไม่ถึงอ่ะในเสาร์อาทิตย์เนี่ย
เฮ้ยไม่ใช่นี่คืออะไรหมูจะไม่ยังไม่
เอาเสาร์อาทิตย์เดี๋ยววันจันทร์วันอังคารเข้ามาให้ก็ได้แต่เดี๋ยววันนี้หมูจะไปสแกนแล้วพรุ่งนี้มาคืน
เอ้ยอ๋อไม่ใช่ถ้าจะคืนพรุ่งนี้ทั้งหมดก็คือคืนพร้อมกันหมดเลย พี่นึกว่าจะเก่งนี่เลย
ผมพี่วินจะรีบอ่านคืนนี้
โอ้ยคืนนี้ยังไม่ทันคืนนี้กลับไปก็กี่โมงแล้ว
ปกติเห็นคนเร็วตลอด
เฮ้ยไม่อันนี้ก็เดี๋ยวคืนไปเลยพรุ่งนี้
เดี๋ยวจะไปรบกวนการอ่านหนังสือของพี่วิน
ไม่ใช่
เร็วยิ่งกว่าจรวด
ปิดมาแล้วนี่ว่าเฉลยกันบ้างเลยนะ
ปัญหาในสมองพี่วินเลยเนี่ยคือมีปัญหาตั้งทำในพันทิปมันมีมั้งวะ
อุ้ยพอแม่เลยไม่ถึงขนาดนี้
ชอบนะมันจะแบบเว็บแนะนำกระทู้แนะนำในพันทิปเนี่ย
นี่ทำไมถึงพันทิปหน้าจอมันตัวเองไม่ออก
ไม่นี่มัน Facebook แต่หมายถึงว่ามันจะมีเว็บเพจของ Facebook ที่แบบคอยดึงกระทู้พันทิปมาโพสต์ไง
เฉลยนี้จริงอ่ะเนี่ยพี่ข้อนี้ที่เขาที่ผิงพูดเฉลยตามนี้เลยนึกว่าจะแก้มันเยอะ
TA ก็เฉลยตามนี้แหละ TA เขามีเฉลยอันนี้ก่อน
ๆ
เชื่อว่าไม่มีทางที่ TA จะมาเพราะว่าเทอมที่แล้วอะหมูเข้ากับ TA คนนึงอะเขาก็เฉลยตามนี้
แต่
แต่พ
ที่
อ
ข้อนี้เขาบอกว่าเขาอ่านโจทย์แล้วยังคิดว่า
แต่ TA อะมีอันเนี้ยก่อนที่จะมาเข้าเฉลยแล้ว TA เพราะฉะนั้นเขาก็เลยคิดว่าต้นอาทิตย์ต้นไอ้นี้ที่3อยู่ตรงนี้ไงเพราะ TA มันมีเฉลยอาจารย์มาก่อนแล้ว
ก็ถูกแล้วเนี่ยก็ยังอยู่ตรงนี้01
ไม่จริงที่มันมีคนเถียงว่าไอ้ต้นคาบที่3อะหมายถึงตรงนี้
เดี๋ยวก่อน0อยู่ตรงไหน0อยู่
ส่วนอยู่นี่ส่วนขีดนี้
1 2 3
4
ก็ต้องอยู่ตรงนี้ไงหาไพรส์ตรงนี้ถูกไหม
ไม่ต้นพีเดียดที่3นะสตาร์ทพีเดียด3
ก็นี่0
ที่ถ้าแบบนี้เป็นพีเดียดที่0เนาะ
ก็นี่1ใช่ป่ะ1 2 3ก็เนี่ย
แต่มันถามว่า
กิน
นี่มันเป็นท้ายพีเดียด3แล้วพี่หมูเข้าใจอ่ะ
พี่ไม่คิดอย่างนี้พี่คิดว่าเต้นก็
ถ้าเกิด
1 2 3
ถ้าเกิดคณะมาแคสฟอร์ต้นปีที่3
พี่คิดอย่างนั้น
อ๋อเหรอ
ผมเข้าใจแบบนี้ มีใช่ไหมส่วน1 2 3 4
ก็คือ
cash flow ต้น period ที่3
ก็ตรงนี้
อ๋อผมเข้าใจว่าตรงนี้
เลย
นี่คือ period ที่1ต้นปีปลายปี พอถึงปลายปีปึ๊บนับเป็นปีที่1ถึงตรงนี้นับเป็นปีที่2นี่คือ31ตุลา31ธันวา31ธันวา
ก็นี่ไม่
31ธันวาของปีแรกอยู่ตรงไหน
ธันวาของปีแรกก็ตรงนี้
ก็ต้องอยู่นี่คือปลายปีที่1เนี่ย ถ้าแบบนี้ต้นปีที่1นี่ปลายปีที่1ปลายปีที่1คือต้นปีที่2ถึงปลายปีที่2ต้นปีที่3ถึงปลายปีที่3ต้นปีที่4ถึงปลายปีที่4ถ้าเกิดต้นปลายปีที่3จะต้องอยู่ที่หน้า